Hey! If you're wondering why I'm wearing this, and I made this myself many years ago, it's because I wear it when it's really cold and there's snow outside, and never in my life have I ever remembered snow in November. Actually, I've never remembered snow ever occurring here until like Christmas or after Christmas. It is really cold outside. there's snow falling outside, which is really weird from November. So that's why I'm wearing this. People say, "Why are you wearing that? You look like a Jedi Master or something." It's like, well, it's comfortable. Um, I was making a list, and I told everybody that I am, and it's the one thing that I've promised for quite some time. And so I need to deliver that on that first. I'll be done with it, with that list of definitions like space, time, dielectricity, counter space, incommensurability, on and on. You know, a list of definitions for the stuff that I do and my magnetism book and the articles that I write. So the one thing that everybody keeps asking about in live stream and in general, they keep asking about time. And I've said a million times, and this is not me saying it, all the ancient cultures said the same thing. And by the way, off topic, and I've said this many times before also, all ancient cultures said time is the number 4. It takes a while to explain that, a really long time. But they all said the same thing. The Greeks, the Indians, the Egyptians said time is number 4. Look that up if you want to do some deep digging. Take a long time to explain, but 4 is the only number that's not found within the first 5 digits of the Fibonacci sequence. Well, not found at all in the Fibonacci sequence. We got 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. First 2, of course, sort of the agathon, or the absolute. The second is the euristostais, or the extrinsic attribute of the absolute. And 1 and 1, of course, are 1. 2 and 3 are magnitude and mass, and the 5 is ontos, or being, which is the consubstantiality. This is where the trinity actually came from. The first 5 digits of the Fibonacci sequence are a trinity: 1 and 1, 2 and 3, 2 and 3, and 5. That's where the Pythagorean and probably Neo-Pythagorean also exist amongst the Egyptians in some obscure texts, but that's where the trinity came from. But the one thing that people keep asking about is time. And time doesn't exist at all. It exists conventionally, but it doesn't exist absolutely at all. All human beings are in a perpetual dream state. That sounds like a passage from the movie Poltergeist. Sounds reminiscent to that, but I mean, this is true. Dreams don't exist at all, but when we're in dreams, they seem incredibly real. But for waking beings, the dream is time. Time does not exist ultimately at all. Time is not a thing. Time's brother, if you will, and also too the number for space, or kura, or ka, space. The word for space is the brother of time. We say one is the brother, one is the sister. The incommensurate twins of things that are unreal, of mass and magnitude. But time doesn't exist ultimately at all. Human beings apportion time as far as past, present, future, now, instant, blink. These, of course, are conceptual subdivisions of measure, related always to magnitudes. And that's all time is. Time is a measure of the passage of magnitudes and masses. When we have masses, we have magnitudes. This is the reason why human beings are also too puzzled by black holes, or what we call black holes. They're not actually black, and they're not holes at all. What they are is supermasses that have no magnitudes. But we have no parallel for that here on Earth. Human beings don't understand what a supermass with no magnitude is. But that's where dielectricity overthrows magnetism's ability to keep anything within the visible universe. As a little aside reference, we have no parallel to compare it to, but if you understand field theory very clearly and lucidly, understanding what the phenomenon of a black hole is extremely simple. Analogously, in a very crude analogy, time is the dangerous flight of imagine if we were to, everyone's seen a mechanical clock face, you know, the minute hand and the hour hand. Well, imagine a clock face the size of a small town, and you're sitting on the clock face. Time is the dangerous flight of the hands on a clock for which the metaphysicians and all forms of monistic metaphysics, both Greek and Indian, always point to the axial point. It's that point at a clock which you know, and don't take the analogy too far, is causing the movement of the, possibly a second hand also, a second hand, a minute hand, and the hour hand. The metaphysicians are always pointing to the axial point, which is unmoved, or the unmoved mover, or the nexus of the hourglass. We all know an hourglass shape, which by the way is a hyperboloid. We actually have the movement of sands from the top to the bottom. So we have movement on both ends. We have the antinomies of movement, where we have what has occurred as past, what is and is also occurring, the future, but the center of which would be the point of counterspace, where time does not exist. We can never measure time in an hourglass from an indivisible point, and point, of course, is also purely conceptual of counterspace, nor could we ever judge time on a clock. If you actually had a clock where you ripped off, in a fit of anger, the hour, second, and minute hands, where you just had an axial point, the clock is still working. Nobody could tell time. Time wouldn't exist. And of course it would still exist just because the clock faces are not present, so don't take the analogy too far. Nobody could tell time. Time is only the movement and measure of magnitudes. It doesn't exist ultimately whatsoever at all. Time is made up of, by the way, you have to think about this for a second, but this is the standpoint of monistic metaphysics, all of the Greeks and Indians. Time is made up only of future and past only, which are wholly unreal. And as I said, time doesn't exist, it's only a measure. Now is not part of now or the present. You have these silly little groups that are always talking about be here now. Well, samsara is just an unbroken chain of present moments. But now is not part of time at all. For what is of time cannot be still or be now. Time, by its very definition, is movement and measures of magnitudes which are never still, which are never now. So now, or in this moment, or other conceptual ideations of the present, is not part of time at all. Time only references past and future, and past and future are unreal creatures, just like holographic mirages. The past is memory and desire, which human beings cling to, recollection, or smriti, or sati, or as the Greeks called it, anamnesis, that human beings cling to, like great things that happened in our past, which we wish would occur again, and we're living in the past, but it is merely a recollection, a memory of things. And if anything actually proves, if you were to apply great metaphysical retroductive logic to it, since time is only future and past are wholly unreal, and also too explains 99% of the neurosis of all humanity, because we're worried, concerned, hopeful, desirous, clinging to, adverse to, in fear of things which don't exist, which is the future and the past. These things are wholly unreal, but that's all time refers to. But time is not a thing at all. Just as a shadow is not a thing. A shadow is a noun in the dictionary, but a shadow is not real at all. There's no such thing as a shadow. A shadow is an absence of light. This concept reification is something human beings are really good at, but it is mental mirages that human beings have constructed, which we swim in and we're prey to, and slaves to. Most people are slaves to, but which of course don't exist. Time, like space, is the attributional byproduct of magnitude, birthed by force, which of course is magnetism. Literally the after effect by divergent or centrifugal force vector, i.e. magnetism, i.e. a three-dimensional force vector, which defines the toroidal geometry of force and motion, the release of energy, i.e. a Cartesian manifestation. The after effect of a divergent magnetic field is space and time. But space has no properties. It only has attributes, just like a shadow. Shadow has no properties either. It has attributes, but no properties. A shadow is not a thing. A shadow is an absence of something. Space is not a thing. Space is the actual absence of something. This is the reason why space is not a terminal for any field modality. With time, we have, and we all have, the antinomies, and with the antinomies are becoming. Aristotle spoke at great length, so did Plato, about the antinomies. Fat, skinny, beautiful, ugly, young, old, on and on, the antinomies of existence. And the antinomies are the suffering nexus for the attribute of the measure of masses and magnitudes, which we conventionally call time. But time is fake, it's a mirage, it's unreal. Once again, time is only past and future, and past and future don't exist at all except in our minds, just like a shadow, just like other conceptual things that human beings ideate, like emptiness. Emptiness doesn't exist, chaos doesn't exist, there's no such thing as a shadow. All these things that we think exist that don't exist at all. Whoops. So recollection is misery or desire over past time, hope and desire or fear and other feelings over future time. And those are the fires, okay, we got fire, the fires within which the minds of all ignorant creatures burn. And they burn, well, figuratively, they burn almost literally, because consciousness is a reality unto its own self. And by consciousness, I don't refer to the empirical psychophysicality of life itself. I'm referring to the consubstantiality, yet partial, transcendent principle that gives life definition. You know, there's no radio signal in the radio, and there's no soul in the body, but that's not a denial of a soul. It's like, does a human being have a soul? Have implying possession. No, a human being doesn't have a soul. That's not a denial of the soul in any way, shape, or form. I would never, ever, ever do that, because that's not true. It just means that that life is the consubstantiality of matter and spirit. So these things are ultimately unreal, but conventionally very real, and by nature of the fires of ignorance, primordial agnosis, one burns by false identification with that which they are not, identification of the psychophysical. It would be as if a sentient signal, sentient radio signal, were to identify with a radio and suffer due to the demise of the breakdown and old age, and, you know, just as electronics break down, you know, the human body breaks down, right? So now doesn't exist. You know, it's purely conceptual. There's no such thing as a present moment or now, nor is that by definition in any way associated with time, as the Greeks or Indians logically and intelligently and accurately said so. All of which human beings are insane with in the psychosis of humanity is fears or desires or hopes, countless feelings over the unending flow of what ultimately doesn't exist. There is no dissectable moment in time any more than someone were to stick their, take their socks off and wade out into a fast-moving stream could ever stick their feet in the same waters twice. Nobody could do that. Time has no present moment, nor is there, and human beings really believe that nonsense. Now is not connected. Well, now is a part of time. No, I mean, that's just a subdivision, a subdivisional conceptualization about the appartitioning of time. The future here, and the present moment here, and the past over here. That doesn't exist at all. Mother Nature doesn't understand time that way, because that's not what time is. Of course, Mother Nature doesn't exist as a real entity, but to carry the concept out, that would be completely foreign to Mother Nature, because that's not what time is. It doesn't have subsects. Well, this is future time, this is past time, and this is current time. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as like current flow either. Like when you're sitting your feet in the middle of a river that's fast moving, or a stream, you know, there's this current flow. It's like, what do you mean? There is no. So you can have smaller and smaller and smaller measures of what we call time, but it's still flow, even down to the smallest microsecond. is still flow. It's like if you're able to cut water, you know, and cut a drop in half and cut it in half again and again and again, and cut it in half 1,000 times until you know, you came down to water. It's still water. It came down to a molecule of water. Flow is still flow, no matter how small the time is. There's no such thing as current time or present moment time or now. Now, present moment. A lot of Zen people, they've made like a religion out of the present moment, which is ridiculous. Because the present moment is no different than saying samsara. That's like saying a small slice of hell. To say like exist in the present moment, which doesn't exist because time is just a measure, and that time is only a measure of masses and magnitudes which define the bubble of suffering which human beings burn within. You know, to worship at the altar of now or the present moment is purely ludicrous. That's like saying you're worshiping, instead of worshiping a demon, you're only worshiping the fingernail of the demon. You know? It's still the demon, right? That's taking the analogy too far. This is why humans are so insane. Part of the reason which. And this is the reason why people, certain shallow people keep getting facelift. They're always trying to preserve a moment which will never appear again. You almost feel bad for the people that like do exercises 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you know they might have smoking hot bods and perfect tans and washboard stomachs, but they can't keep it up. Every person I've seen that's tried to keep that stuff up, they can't keep it up. There's no one's that good. Some people try though. Some people do a good job at it, but you know, like look at Schwarzenegger now compared to when he, you know, did Conan the Barbarian, right? Can't keep it up. It's not to say it's not good to stay healthy, of course. But time exists conventionally, not ultimately. What exists between 2 points or atoms is always merely dimension. And a point is also too conceptual. There's no such thing as a point. A point is something human beings created. Mother Nature has no points. Mother Nature only works by force of motion, inertia, and acceleration, and everything is pressure mediation. So what exists between 2 points or 2 atoms is always dimension. And dimension is time. To say time and to say dimension is the same thing. To say magnetism and to say create space and to say creates time is also too the same. When you have magnetism, you have space. And you have space, you have time. Time is only a measure. Time doesn't exist at all. Time, there is no such thing as time. To talk about bending time, or I mean, it's like talking about how many leprechauns can you fit on the head of a pin. It's like, well, leprechauns don't exist. Yeah, equally the same. Worry about bending space and time is as equally ludicrous about talking about how much does a unicorn weigh. Well, who cares, because they don't exist. So anyway, between these 2 dimensions, and dimension is, of course, time, and which is, of course, also to space, which, of course, is also to magnetism, as I said, but space is nothing. Space is absence. Space is the mirage of eternity in counter space. But eternity is not a reference to time. It means everlasting in the absolute sense of beyond or transcendent to time. Anything that's transcendent to time is not within the Euclidean or Cartesian universe. It is in counter space. And counter space, of course, is just another ludicrous word human beings created. So it has no properties. And time absolutely does not exist at all. But it does exist conventionally. And no one's going to deny old age and death, right? Well, that's time, you know, you get old, so time does exist. Conventionally, it does. But from the perspective of metaphysics, no, time doesn't exist at all. Time is only a measure. That's all it is. And time is the number 4. Take me a long time to explain that, but it's number 4. And number 4 doesn't exist within the Fibonacci sequence. And it doesn't exist there for good reason, because time doesn't exist. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Have a lovely day. Good boy.